Good evening. Right now, Metro Police are desperately searching for the person or people responsible for killing a man and a woman.
And I got a male down in the middle of the street.
Breaking news now, a triple shooting leaves 2 dead.
Never expect for somebody to tell you your loved one was murdered.
This Labor Day will mark 42 years that have haunted the St. Cloud family.
30 years. 30 years this family has waited for answers.
A couple months go by, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you really start to struggle with the idea that the case might not get solved and that somebody might get away with murder.
It's very unfortunate that we have any cold cases at all, and certainly unfortunate that we have as many as we do. And that's why Ryan's work and the work of Project Cold Case is so important.
Hello, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Ryan Backman, founder and executive director of Project Cold Case. And with me today is Freda Washington-Perez, our lead advocate. Thanks for joining me, Freda.
Not a problem.
Yeah, it was only right next door.
Yeah.
One office away. This week we wanted to talk about support meetings a little bit. And this is one of those subjects that is sometimes taboo. People don't want to admit they go. People are nervous about going. People don't know what to expect, or they have a vision or impression in their head of what they think it is. And we want to kind of talk about our support meetings here at Project Cold Case, how we think they benefit some people, what you can expect if you show up, and then, talk a little bit about those families that we serve that aren't in Jacksonville, that don't get to come to, our office. And Freda, you do all the calling. Yeah. You let everybody know when the support meetings are, what to expect that month. We try to mix it up a little bit and bring different speakers in, different kind of components to grieving, so that it's not always just somebody's vision of a group of people sitting in chairs in a circle in a classroom, know.
And I do hear that a lot of families, assume, well, I don't want to come because I don't want to cry. Or there is a lot of apprehension when they are faced with that prospect of coming to grief support. But it is beneficial.
It is. And I want to talk from experience here. It was a turning point for me personally, going to a support meeting. And a lot of people have heard me talk about this before, but after my dad was killed and then I lost my job, I was really at a low point, and Compassionate Families called and they asked me if I was interested in coming to a men's only support meeting that was coming up in that weekend. And so I knew I needed something. I didn't know what that was, so I ended up going. I didn't know what to expect. I had never been to an event with Compassionate Families. I had never met any of the individuals there. I walked in. There were 3 other men. It was a small support meeting, and all of them had lost children. And for me, that kind of was a perspective thing. Like I tell people, I know I was supposed to bury my dad, just not how I did. Yeah. Those men were never supposed to bury their children. So it really helped me just right out of the gate by putting things in perspective a little bit. And then I started looking at these gentlemen and I was thinking, gosh, career job. One of them was in the Navy, and I was thinking, gosh, these guys, not only have they survived the loss of a child, but somehow they're still being productive members of society. They're not curled up in a corner somewhere, which is kind of what I wanted to do at that time. Yeah. And so it really was enlightening for me, and it was kind of the first turning point in my grief journey, and recognizing being surrounded by other people that had experienced something similar, being able to talk openly and freely about some of those thoughts and feelings. I know, my wife, and we've talked about this before when she was a guest. She really struggled with how I was finding comfort around strangers as opposed to with her. But there was just something comforting about being surrounded by people that had been through something. The same situation. And so, that was the start for me. And it really allowed me to kind of follow in someone else's footsteps and know that I wasn't alone, and know that I didn't have to blaze this trail by myself, and figure out there were other people that had navigated surviving this ahead of me, and were kind of helping me through it. And so now we want to do that for the families that we serve.
And I do think our situation is a bit unique because, you know, with Compassionate Families, you were able to go right into the grief therapy when you were comfortable. But what I noticed with our families with cold cases, they're, you know, 5, 10, 15 years removed from the actual homicide with no justice in that sense. And getting them to come is kind of a defeating, mechanism. They're like, well, what's the point? What's the use? But definitely mental health is definitely something they should focus on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're right, because in Compassionate Families, really the first, inkling of an idea to start Project Cold Case was also due to support meetings, because a lot of times those support meetings turned into how slow the judicial process was, and it turned into court and what happened in court. And I go every month to pre-trials and people, and there was a lot of that. We did spend a lot of time in court, so that kind of dominated the conversations. Excuse me. And when there's no arrest in your case, that's not really a concern of yours at that moment. Exactly. You know what I mean? So, so I started to recognize that, and I had a couple of survivors tell me, I love the people at the support meeting. I love how, sometimes how it goes, but a lot of times it picks a path of the judicial process, and it stays there, and it never really comes back. And so, and at the time we had talked with the powers that be at Compassionate Families about a secondary support group just for unsolved cases. It never really came to fruition. But now we have that here, and it is very different for somebody that has had to live the last decade or two, without knowing who did it or why, and versus somebody that has lost a loved one very recently and is dealing with those emotions. So it's a different experience here for these support meetings, and they're very casual. I think there's a start and a stop time, but that's not like your arrival and departure time. We start the meetings at 6 and we stop them at 8, but people are free to come and go as they please, as their schedule allows. You can talk as much or as little as you would like. Sometimes it's good to just come in and observe and hear what other people have gone through and how they've handled a situation. And for us, we do like to know who's in the room.
Yeah, there's of course the introduction.
An introduction,
and then
but
you're free
at
to
that
just
point,
kind of sit there and listen or take from it what you will.
Exactly. And I think that's an important thing, because if you're not comfortable in there, but you're curious, know that you don't have to come in and start telling your whole story. Like, you can just observe and listen. And we have a lot of good times. As weird as it sounds. We do. We have meetings that are full of joy and laughter.
There's laughs, it's not, you're not passing the tissue around, but of course there's always that, that sense that while we're there. And
sometimes somebody needs to get something off their chest, and it can get heavy and it can get deep, but there's support for them there, and we have those moments, but it's not the, sad, depressing downer that I think sometimes is associated with.
And that is the notion. I hear it echoed a lot, especially when I call around, because we do handle cases nationwide. And one of the questions I always ask our families that aren't local, who can't benefit from our support group, is what kind of victim services are in your area? Are there any nonprofits? Are you in a grief support? And surprisingly, depending on the area, there may not be a grief support.
Right.
And so I will try to look for some for them, but one of the first things that you hear is, well, I don't want to go and cry. I don't want to cry anymore. And I'm like, well, it's really good just to fellowship with other families dealing with the same thing.
I remember a meeting a few months ago where, we had a family that had gone through a few years of no answers, and then an arrest was made, and then the trial, or the case has since been resolved, and he pled guilty, and the family was expressing how they handled that situation when it was unsolved, and I think a lot of our families, like there was some real laughs in there, you know, because now you could look back on it and laugh, but I think it really offered hope to some of the other families and gave them a bit of a path. We've had guests come and speak, including from the state attorney's office, who offered some suggestions as far as, like, you know, a lot of times we feel like the best form of communication is telephone because you're actually speaking to that individual. But when you're not getting responses with telephone, like, actually email is
the paper
better
trail. So
we
we did have someone that offer insights, because we do try to bring a different element to our group supports that, you know, offer our families the opportunity to fellowship with other families, but also give them perspective on some of the things that happen behind the scenes.
Right, exactly.
And, you know, leaving that paper trail was definitely one good point that was brought up.
It was an eye-opener. There was a number of individuals at our meeting that were like, I'm going home to write, you know, a letter, and I'm going to send an email. And then you have proof that you did reach out, and you have that. And another thing is, you know, sometimes our memories, when we do get that conversation, that phone call, we forget to ask things, or we forget what the answers were, or we forget something else that was said. And if it's in writing, you can always go back and look at it.
And I'm glad you said that, because that's one of the things I offer to our families when they do come to our grief support. I always follow up with a recap email and kind of give them that information, because sometimes, you know, you may not be all there engaged in what's going on as far as memorizing exact questions or specifics. So always make sure there's a recap email with all the pertinent information for our families. Yeah,
and you do some call out and some, you know, outreach for families that aren't local. A lot of times trying to find them somewhere that will that does host support meetings.
Yeah, and sometimes it's really a needle in a haystack. It really depends on, you know, where they are, you know, in their local area. But then once I do find resources, I do call and follow up with those resources, so that I can give our family an idea of what to expect once they do make that call. Because again, they're apprehensive about the process. So
well, and the truth is none of this, you know, no support meeting, no counseling is going to help unless you're in the right frame of mind, and unless you're comfortable. And that's our goal, is to make our support meetings comfortable. And I have experienced, and I know other people that have experienced it. You go to some individual counseling and you just do not mesh with the person. And I mean, my advice is always like, find someone else. Don't stop going completely, but that is not the right person for you. If you're not comfortable with them, then they're not going to do you a lot of good. And let's find somebody that you are comfortable with. So you've kind of taken on this role of making sure that we have something planned at every few support meetings, every other support meetings, and so that it doesn't become complacent and redundant. It's not the same few people asking the same questions or rehashing the same stories. And so we've got our next support meeting is next Thursday, the 26th. So not this one coming up this week, but the following week on the 26th. And you scheduled therapy dogs to come in. Tell us about that, because this was a really this kind of formed and then took off. And
it was definitely one of those opportunities where it was mentioned, I believe, when, you know, we first started talking about being consistent with our group therapy, like how can we reach our families. And, you know, sometimes families need to be reached on a different, you know, outlet and avenue. And so, of course, when I heard dogs, I just said, well, let me see what's out there. Because I had seen it work at the state attorney's office. And so what I did, I started Googling, and I found Therapy Animal Coalition. It's a local organization here in Jacksonville, and they use the healing power of animals. So I'm pretty excited that Miss Sam Morrison reached out to me. And it was really interesting because she was my contact for the Therapy Animal Coalition, but she had just as many questions for what Project Cold Case does that we had for her. So it was kind of like, and what are you guys doing, and how can we help you? So it was really an interesting phone conversation. But yes, I'm super excited to say we will have some therapy dogs in our our next meeting.
Yeah, and they were so gracious and supportive in helping to bring the the dogs in. They wanted to know how many we wanted.
I'm like, all of them, of course.
Yeah.
But of course, there's other animals. I didn't know how you were going to feel about it, but they do have cats, pigs, and many horses.
I feel fine about that. I don't know how the landlord feels about us using the.
But I thought that was pretty interesting that we get to choose our animal, and
That is.
I'm very excited about the 3 prospects we have coming.
Yeah, well, this is an exciting thing. This is something that one day, we always have these goals, long term, short term. We're always, brainstorming in this office on how to best serve our families, how to bring new resources to the families, and a therapy animal has been one of those things.
It's on our Santa wish list.
Yeah, and I think of course you take into account there are some people that aren't comfortable with animals, but a goal of mine would be able to have a therapy animal. It's probably gonna have to be a dog.
I'm fine.
I don't think we can keep a
no horses.
therapy horse or pig in here. I did used to want a grief monkey. I thought a grief monkey would be great to have in the office.
But you do bring another interesting point. Some families, some people just aren't dog people, and we have done a great job with ensuring that our families know ahead of time what we're doing and how to plan for it. But we are pretty excited to have this opportunity.
Yeah, we haven't had anybody say they're not coming because of the dogs.
More people say they are coming.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
Of the dogs,
so I think this is going to be good. Animals bring so much love to our lives, and when you have that opportunity to really provide an animal for something like that, it just it's a great thing for everybody involved, and I think that there's no feeling of unconditional love like that of a pet. They really, really love you no matter what. Yeah. And sometimes when you're grieving and you're having a really hard time, you don't need somebody to tell you what to do. You don't need somebody to fix it. Sometimes you just need somebody to sit next to you.
Exactly.
Sometimes you just need somebody to listen, and those are what our animals and pets do, and that's what the Therapy Animal Coalition will provide us for that meeting next week. Just an opportunity to smile, pet a dog, and experience that love. So I'm super excited about that, and you finding that particular group, I think, is going to end up benefiting us.
Oh, definitely.
In the long run, because now we've started the process of what do we have to do to, get an animal to be considered a therapy animal.
Definitely, and there's a difference between therapy and support animals, which we found. I mean, I can't, go into detail, but I didn't know there was a difference until it was pointed out.
Yeah. So, service animals and support animals, they are, I think a lot of times they provide a service, whether it's someone that's blind and the dog is a seeing eye dog, or whether it's, animals do so much now. I think they can tell when you're low on blood sugar or insulin, they can do so much. And a lot of times you hear people when they say you have a service dog, like don't walk up and pet it, like ask the owner if you can. And I think therapy dogs is almost the opposite of that. Therapy dog is like, you can't pet that dog enough. I think that's the goal of the therapy dog is to interact with people and not so much take care of
and another thing I found out by providing this service, for our grief support group, is the process was relatively simple. So while we're out here finding, avenues and outlets for, our support group, we're also learning other various nonprofits or organizations that can help, and educate our families. So the process was pretty simple, and they reach right back out. So
we're looking forward to that. It's not something that's going to happen every support meeting. We've got it next week, and we don't have it scheduled again. We may, we'll see how well it goes, and we may book them again sometime in the future. We've got some other things on the horizon for when the holidays roll around. We've got a licensed mental health professional that's going to come down and just for an hour of our support meeting in November, I think, and do do some facilitated support meeting, which I think is good to mix it up a little bit. There's something great about the peer support because it's, we know where we've come from and what we're going through, but sometimes to have a professional come in and kind of help us learn a little bit, ways, techniques to deal and cope is always beneficial. And then we may or may not have a concert.
May or may not.
We're working on lots of things. Know that we do accept suggestions. Don't get your feelings hurt if we don't do it. We have a lot of ideas already, and we're not trying to necessarily do something every single month. Like some months it's good to just be able to come in there, not have an agenda, and be able to talk, especially if somebody is going through something specific.
Exactly.
But we also don't want it to get too redundant. We want to be able to mix it up a little bit. I know in the past we've not here at this office, but with another group that used to do support meetings, we did photo albums, scrapbooking, and so that may be something we look into at a future point. So, but those are the things that we're trying to do. So it almost becomes, I don't want to call it a social event because it has a purpose and it has a definitive reason and benefit to attending, but I would rather people consider it consider it that than a circle of chairs and everybody crying, so. But
I do also think that with every different for our support group, when we do consider organizations like the Therapy Animal Coalition, it's all with a targeted purpose, whether it's the music for the concert later, or someone coming in explaining judicial process. We always have an educational prospect and something so the families can hold on to in an educational forum, because they may help, it may offer insight.
It's amazing what you'll learn, just coming in and observing and listening, because families have been through a lot, they have experienced a lot, and even if it's not the exact same thing that you're experiencing at the time, having that education, having that knowledge is power, and it helps along with the journey. Again, for our local families, we have our support meeting the last Thursday of every month, although that'll shift the end of the year because of Thanksgiving holiday schedules, but we'll still have meetings those months. They just are going to be, I think, moved up a week. But typically, with the exception of extreme situations or holidays, the last Thursday of every month is when we have our meetings at our office in downtown Jacksonville, 10 South Noonan Street. There's parking available. The meters are free after 6 o'clock in downtown. We have 3 metered spots right outside our front door. We have a lot around the building that we are actually able to use, after hours. So parking's not an issue. Safety is not a concern. We're right here by the building. We're right across the street from the Hyatt Regency Hotel.
And I do reach out personally to call our families that week of, and then I also try to do a reminder call the day of, just because I know lives get busy. But I do try my best to make sure that we post the information on our websites, our social media.
We try to send out an email. Email will go out tomorrow. So if you haven't signed up for our email list, that's available on our website, projectcoldcase.org. And then let us know specifically if you're interested in the support groups, because the support group list is different than the overall list, because so many people from out of town can't make it to our support groups. But we're looking at ways to address that as well. Either survivors that volunteer to host something in their area, or potentially doing some kind of video feed of our support meeting. The problem with that is that if you're trying to ask questions or talk, we're still trying to work through how to address that. But we've thought about potentially setting up a Facebook Live where you would have access to seeing who's at the meeting in a closed group. So that's one of the things we should mention. Like these these meetings are for survivors and their supporters. You know, we are welcome to bring somebody that hasn't been affected if they're that close to you and they're a big supporter. But we don't let the media come in. We don't let students come in unless it's been talked about and approved by everybody in the meeting. It's not something that, you know, strangers off the street can come in and just sit down. We do typically provide some snacks and drinks and stuff like that because it is, you know, 6 to 8. So we try to make sure that you're fed something. And, you know, you can call Freda, you can call our office, 904-525-8080. You can ask for more information there, here, online. Like Freda said, we send out an email, we do it on social media, we do it, you know, we try to make sure that everybody knows well in advance when our support meetings are so that they can try to plan accordingly. We have found that the Thursdays, you know, at 6 o'clock tend to work well with people's schedules, but so we're, you know, that's our plan for now, is to keep it there. We know that that sometimes doesn't work with everybody's schedule, but
we just keep it consistent.
Yeah.
I think just getting the word out and, you know, letting our families locally know that this service is here for them. So
absolutely. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to our office. You know, go to our website and look there for information, projectcoldcase.org, Facebook. You know, we keep that thing. We keep the information flowing on social media. So make sure you follow all our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And next Thursday, the 26th, 6 p.m. at our office with therapy dogs. So if you're interested, please join us. Anything else, Freda?
Nothing.
All right. Thank you, guys. We'll be back next week with another Facebook Live.